On July 26, 1953, as dawn broke over the city of Santiago de Cuba, a small group of young revolutionaries led by a 26-year-old lawyer named Fidel Castro launched a bold and desperate attack on the Moncada barracks. The raid failed. Most of the attackers were killed, captured, or tortured. But in the wreckage of that failed assault was born a revolution that would shake the Western Hemisphere, defy U.S. hegemony, and inspire generations, while also silencing dissent and centralizing power under one man's vision. This is the story of the 26th of July movement, its origins, its triumphs, and its contradictions. To understand what happened that July morning, we need to go back to a Cuba that glittered on the surface but rotted underneath. In the 1950s, Havana boomed as a playground for American tourists and gangsters. But beyond the casinos and seaside hotels lay the other Cuba, a country dominated by foreign capital, rife with poverty, corruption, and social inequality. In 1952, former president and military strongman Fulgencio Batista staged a coup, canceled elections, and installed himself as dictator. He crushed opposition, censored the press, and unleashed his police on students and labor activists. One of those students was Fidel Castro, a young man trained in law, raised in privilege, but radicalized by the political violence and injustice he saw around him. Initially committed to legal reform, Castro concluded that armed struggle was the only way forward. The stage was set for revolution. On July 26, 1953, Castro led a group of 135 revolutionaries in a coordinated attack on two military installations, the Moncada barracks in Santiago and a smaller outpost in Bayamo. The plan was ambitious: seize weapons, rally the people, and ignite a national uprising. But within hours it collapsed. Government forces overwhelmed the attackers. Dozens were executed on the spot. Castro was captured, beaten, and thrown into prison. But what came next would turn defeat into mythology. At his trial, Fidel gave a speech that would echo through Cuban history: La historia me absolverá. History will absolve me. It wasn't just a defense. It was a manifesto. Land for the poor, education for the illiterate, freedom from dictatorship and foreign domination. That speech turned a military disaster into a moral victory and transformed Fidel Castro from a failed insurgent into a national symbol. Released under an amnesty in 1955, Castro fled to Mexico, where he regrouped. There, alongside his brother Raúl and an Argentine doctor named Ernesto Che Guevara, he formed the Movimiento 26 de Julio, the 26th of July movement. This was no disorganized rebellion. Castro built a structured, disciplined organization combining political outreach, fundraising, and military planning. Its ideology blended nationalism, anti-imperialism, and land reform. Back in Cuba, the regime was under pressure. Labor strikes, student protests, and urban sabotage drained Batista's strength. Meanwhile, M26-7 prepared for a second attempt, this time from the mountains. On December 2, 1956, 82 revolutionaries crowded aboard a leaky yacht named Grandma and sailed from Mexico to Cuba. The landing was a disaster. Swamped by bad weather, poor planning, and ambushes, only a handful survived. But those survivors, Castro, Che, Raúl, and about a dozen others, fled to the Sierra Maestra Mountains. There, amid rugged terrain and supportive peasant communities, they launched a guerrilla war. It was grueling. Supplies were short. The jungle was unforgiving. Yet slowly the rebels grew stronger. They attacked outposts, captured weapons, and built trust among local farmers by distributing food, teaching literacy, and treating the sick. Urban cells continued the pressure: sabotage, strikes, and propaganda. It was a war fought on two fronts, and Batista's regime was slowly bleeding. By 1958, Batista was desperate. He launched Operation Verano, deploying tens of thousands of troops to crush the rebels. But his soldiers, untrained in mountain warfare, were no match for the guerrillas' mobility and local support. Battles like La Plata and Yaguajay were decisive victories for the revolutionaries. Meanwhile, the U.S., once a backer of Batista, began to distance itself, appalled by his brutality and corruption. On New Year's Eve, 1958, Batista fled the country. The next day, Castro's forces rolled into Havana to rapturous crowds. The revolution had won. The early years were a whirlwind of change. Land reform redistributed estates, schools and clinics reached the forgotten corners of Cuba, literacy campaigns mobilized an entire generation. But cracks soon emerged. The United States, angered by nationalized American businesses, imposed sanctions. In response, Castro turned to the Soviet Union. Moderate allies were pushed aside. Radical elements took the reins. The revolution's ideals were reshaped into a rigid Marxist-Leninist model. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, an attempted CIA-backed coup, failed spectacularly and drove Cuba deeper into the Soviet orbit. That same year, Castro declared Cuba a socialist state. By 1962, all revolutionary factions had been folded into a single communist party. Dissenters, whether liberal reformers, former comrades, or religious voices, were silenced. What had begun as a movement for freedom became a one-party state with tight control over speech, media, and daily life. There's no denying Cuba's social gains. Education, healthcare, and gender equity improved dramatically. Rural communities once abandoned saw clinics, schools, and electrification. But those achievements came at a cost: centralized control, economic inefficiency, and political repression. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Cuba's economy plunged into crisis. Shortages became the norm. Discontent simmered. The revolution had delivered social justice, but at the price of personal freedom. The 26th of July movement began as a cry for sovereignty, dignity, and justice. It toppled a dictator, built schools and hospitals, and defied global superpowers. But it also fell into the same trap that haunts many revolutions: consolidating power in the name of unity, crushing dissent in the name of survival. As Cuba faces a new century, its people wrestle with the weight of that legacy. Calls for reform, internet access, and civil liberties challenge the old guard. Younger generations dream of change but fear repression. What remains is a complex truth. Revolutions can inspire, but they can also consume. The Cuban Revolution's impact rippled far beyond the island's shores. From Latin America to Africa and Asia, guerrilla movements adopted its guerrilla tactics and rhetoric of anti-imperialism. Governments from Nicaragua to Angola invoked Cuba's experience to justify their own struggles, while Fidel Castro's speeches at the United Nations galvanized post-colonial leaders. Yet as solidarity missions brought Cuban doctors and teachers to developing nations, they also stirred controversy. Critics accused Havana of exporting authoritarianism under the guise of humanitarianism. Thus, Cuba became both a beacon of resistance and a cautionary tale for revolutionary movements worldwide. Simultaneously, waves of Cuban exiles reshaped the story of the revolution abroad. First in Florida and later across Europe and Latin America, émigré communities carried memories of Batista's abuse and Castro's early promise. They sent remittances that bolstered families back home and lobbied foreign governments for tighter sanctions. Their testimonies, hopeful, anguished, or critical, created a complex transnational dialogue about the revolution's legacy. The 26th of July movement is more than a date on a calendar. It is a symbol of hope and a cautionary tale. It asks a question that transcends Cuba. Can a society fight for justice without sacrificing freedom? Can revolution deliver equality without becoming authoritarian? That question remains unanswered, but it matters, now more than ever. The Cuban Revolution changed history, but history is still watching. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe for more captivating stories from our past. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.